I never gave much thought to forest folklore. Growing up in a noisy city, tales of haunted woods and cursed trails seemed like nothing more than entertainment, fairy tales for those with too much time and not enough logic. So when I heard whispers about a remote woodland called Whispering Pines, tucked deep in the Oregon mountains, I didn't take it seriously. Locals said people went missing there, that the trees themselves whispered your name. I scoffed. Just another legend. It wasn't until last October that I decided to see it for myself. I had taken some time off from my freelance photography work, and I was looking to capture the untouched beauty of fall. The more remote, the better. Whispering Pines wasn't on any map, but I found directions through an old blog, its final entry actually. The idea of photographing raw, unspoiled nature excited me more than any spooky story could scare me. So I loaded up my gear, charged my camera, and set out for what I thought would be a peaceful solo adventure. I reached the edge of the forest around dusk. The sky had already started shifting from orange to a dusky purple. A rusted metal sign greeted me at the trailhead. Whispering Pines, enter at your own risk. It looked like any other trail, narrow, surrounded by tall trees, with leaves crunching beneath my boots and the smell of pine and earth filling the air. But as I stepped deeper, I noticed something strange. The woods were silent, completely. Not a chirp, not a rustle, not a single buzz of an insect. Just the rhythmic sound of my own footsteps breaking the stillness. As night began to fall, I continued taking photos. Old stumps, twisted roots, pockets of mist floating between the trees. But then, while reviewing one of the shots, I saw something I hadn't noticed before. Far in the distance between two trees was a faint silhouette, almost like a person standing still. I zoomed in. It wasn't a person. It was a face, carved into a tree, with hollow, sunken eyes and a gaping mouth twisted in a silent scream. Startled, I looked up. Nothing. The tree was just a tree. But the moment stayed with me. That was the first crack in my confidence. I kept moving forward, but everything started to feel wrong. The trees didn't look natural anymore. Their limbs stretched and twisted unnaturally, curling like fingers toward the sky. Some even appeared to lean inward, as if they were inching closer with every step. Then came the sound, faint at first, just murmurs on the edge of hearing. Then clearer. Words, voices, whispers. I spun around. No one. And yet the whispers continued. Dozens of voices, urgent and overlapping, as if people were talking just out of sight. Then, I heard it. Ryan. I turned quickly, my heart racing. The trail behind me had vanished. Trees now stood where the path had once been. It was like the forest had rearranged itself around me. I checked my phone. No signal. My GPS froze. The compass app spun wildly. No direction made sense. I tried retracing my steps, but every tree looked the same. The forest was looping, or worse, moving. Panic set in. I started to run, but no matter which way I turned, the landscape remained unchanged. The trees repeated in endless patterns, like I was trapped in a maze that had no exit. That's when the voices got louder. No longer whispers, now clear and calling. Ryan, come here. You don't have to be afraid. You've been expected. One voice stood out among the rest, familiar, soft. My mother. She'd been gone for 2 years. I hadn't heard her voice in so long. It made my blood run cold and warm at the same time. I turned, and there she was, standing a few feet away, her face half hidden in shadow. Mom? I whispered. She nodded, smiling, but her eyes didn't blink. Her head tilted slightly, then too far, unnaturally. I stepped closer, unsure. Then I saw it. Her face began to split. A crack formed from her cheek to her jaw. Inside was no flesh, just black, hollow space. Her skin peeled at the edges like decaying bark, revealing wooden fibers underneath. I bolted. My flashlight flickered. The deeper I ran, the darker everything became. Trees loomed above me like towers, and suddenly, I saw them. Eyes. Hundreds of yellow, glowing eyes staring from the canopy, motionless, unblinking, watching. Their light pulsed in eerie rhythm, almost like breathing. I stumbled into a clearing. My legs ached, my breath burned. In the center stood a colossal ancient tree. Its trunk was blackened with age, split down the middle like a mouth opened in a silent scream. Around it stood figures, made of moss, bark, roots, and vines. Human-shaped, still. Their faces looked half-formed, like clay molded and then abandoned. But I could feel them watching me. And then they moved. One took a step, another turned its head. I backed away. The last thing I remember was falling. Backward. My head hit something hard and the world went black. I woke up at dawn. I was lying outside the forest, just beyond the tree line. My clothes were ripped. Dirt was caked into my skin. My arms and neck were scratched as if I had crawled through brambles. My backpack was still with me, but my camera? Gone. I checked my phone. Only one photo remained in the gallery. It was a picture of me, lying unconscious on the forest floor, taken from above, and behind me, those same moss-covered figures stood motionless in the shadow, watching. I never went back. I never told anyone. Not really. But sometimes, when I'm alone at night, I still hear them. In the rustle of leaves outside my window, in the groan of the trees when the wind blows, whispering, calling my name. अगर आप चाहें तो अब मैं इस मुकम्मल कहानी के लिए जाए image prompts with her background. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to our channel, Mr. Nightmare Nexus. Leave a comment to share your thoughts, and don't forget to like and share the video with your friends. Your support means the world to us and helps keep the nightmares coming. When I was 10, my family inherited a remote cabin near Black Hollow Lake, a vast, silent body of water surrounded by dense pine forest. My parents thought it was a blessing. Free vacation spot, peaceful nature, and no phone signal to interrupt. But from the very first time we went there, I knew something was wrong with that lake. There were no birds, no insects. Even the wind seemed to avoid the water. It wasn't just quiet, it was unnatural, like the lake was holding its breath. My dog Max would bark endlessly at the water's edge but refused to go near it. At night, we'd hear ripples and splashes like even though nothing should have been moving. Once, I thought I heard whispering, soft, wet voices, but I convinced myself it was just the wind through the trees. Years passed and we stopped going. Life got busy and the eerie cabin fell into memory. But last fall, after my dad died, I returned to the cabin alone, wanting to reconnect with something from the past. It had been over 15 years since I'd seen the lake. When I arrived, the cabin was decayed but standing. The dock still extended into the dark water, rotting and mossy. The moment I stepped out of the car, the silence hit me like a wall. Not a single sound, no rustling trees, no distant calls of animals, just the low, ever-present hum of the lake. I unpacked and decided to walk around the shore. The water was black, almost mirror-like, reflecting nothing but sky. As I walked, I saw small things in the shallows, bones maybe. Not human, but scattered and wrong. It looked like the lake had been collecting things, consuming them. That night, I couldn't sleep. There were wet sounds outside, slithering, shifting. I looked out the window and saw ripples near the dock. Then, a shape. It rose slowly out of the water, tall, thin, barely visible. No face, no features, just dripping limbs and eyes that shimmered like fish scales. I backed away, shaking, but when I looked again, it was gone. I told myself it was a dream. But in the morning, footprints long, webbed, slick with algae, led from the lake to my cabin door. I should have left then, but something kept me there. Some whisper in the back of my mind that said, look deeper. I began researching the lake, digging through old town records. Turns out Black Hollow Lake was built over a small village. In the 1800s, a massive flood consumed the town and everyone in it. The townsfolk had been holding strange rituals, trying to appease the lake god, according to faded church documents. They believed something lived beneath the water, and they fed it sacrifices, livestock at first, then people. I was horrified, but I couldn't stop. I had to know what was really down there. So I rented diving gear from the nearest town, 3 hours away, and prepared to dive into the center of the lake. The water was freezing and thick. Visibility dropped to 0 within minutes. But I kept going, deeper, following a strange pull. That's when I saw it. Buildings. The submerged village was real. Houses, fences, a crumbled church, all intact, and they weren't empty. Shapes moved between them, thin, slow-moving shadows. One brushed against me, and I nearly screamed. Then I saw faces, white, eyeless, mouths wide open in silent screams. Not corpses. They were alive, or something like alive. Panicked, I tried to rise, but something grabbed my leg, cold and strong. I kicked wildly and escaped, rising so fast I almost passed out. I made it to shore and crawled onto the dock, coughing up lake water. I told myself never again, never come back. But last night, my phone buzzed. No caller ID, I answered. A wet voice whispered, "You look too deep. Now the lake remembers you." And in the background, I heard it again. The silence. Alive. Waiting. I had just moved into an old rental house on the outskirts of a sleepy rural town called Halberds End, a place people seemed to forget even existed. It was cheap, too cheap, but I was desperate. I needed to escape the city and all the noise in my head after a rough breakup and months of stress. The moment I saw the house, weathered paint, leaning porch, ivy crawling up its wooden siding, I felt something call to me. It wasn't comfort. It was silence, a kind of silence that watches you back. The landlord was an elderly man named Mr. Finley. His voice rasped like sandpaper when he handed over the keys and mumbled something strange under his breath. I caught only one clear phrase: "Don't go up in the attic after dark." He chuckled nervously after saying it, but his eyes, cloudy, almost colorless, stayed deadly serious. The house creaked and groaned like it had a language of its own. At first, I thought it was just settling, like old houses do. But the sounds weren't random. Sometimes they repeated. Slow, steady, footsteps. I explored the attic on my first day, curious. The ladder creaked under my weight as I climbed up. The attic was a cramped space with slanted wooden beams and dust hanging thick in the air. Old boxes, cracked trunks, and broken furniture sat like forgotten memories. One thing stood out, a large mirror covered in a white sheet pushed into the corner. I didn't touch it. The atmosphere up there was dense. The air felt heavier, colder. I told myself it was just insulation issues. I told myself a lot of things. The first few nights passed quietly, except for the occasional thump from the attic. I joked to myself that maybe the house had rats or squirrels. But on the fourth night, I woke up around 3:17 a.m. A precise time burned into my memory. I didn't know why I was awake until I heard it. Thump, thump, pacing, heavy, deliberate footsteps right above my bedroom ceiling. I held my breath and stared at the ceiling fan slowly turning. Then, as if to mock me, a whisper floated down from the attic, so faint I could barely believe it. "It's not buried deep enough." I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next day, I searched the attic again. That's when I noticed something odd. A section of the attic floor looked newer than the rest, like it had been replaced. But it wasn't a perfect fit. The boards were misaligned slightly, and when I tapped my foot on them, they sounded hollow. I fetched a crowbar from the garage and pried open the loose floorboards. Beneath them, buried in a shallow cavity, were bones, human bones, clearly, along with a rusted child's toy and what looked like a decayed scrap of clothing. The moment I uncovered them, the attic hatch slammed shut behind me. The flashlight in my hand sputtered and died. The attic dropped into suffocating darkness. I could hear my own heartbeat until I couldn't, because something else was breathing in there with me. The whispers began again, louder, closer. I tried to scream, but my voice wouldn't come. My body felt locked in place. Something scraped across the wooden floor behind me. It wasn't footsteps, it was crawling. Then I felt it. A cold, brittle hand touched my ankle. I must have blacked out. I awoke hours later at the bottom of the attic stairs with a gash on my forehead and dirt under my nails. The attic hatch was open, like it never closed. I ran out of the house barefoot, but I couldn't leave. Not yet. The police dismissed me, calling it stress-induced hallucination. I didn't mention the bones. I went back with a flashlight and camera, determined to get proof. When I opened the attic again, everything was gone. The floorboards were solid. The bones, the toy, the cavity, gone. But something had followed me back downstairs. Over the next few nights, I heard whispers through the vents. My phone rang at 3:17 a.m. No caller ID, just static and a soft child's voice humming a lullaby. The mirror in the attic? One night I found it downstairs in my hallway, though I had never moved it. Its sheet had been removed, and behind my reflection, something else moved. I left the house the next day and never returned. I didn't even bother to collect my things. I later found out that the house had a dark history. A man named Charles Kearns lived there decades ago. He reportedly murdered his own child in a state of madness, convinced the boy was possessed. The town covered it up. They buried the case just like the body, beneath the attic floor. Now I know why the landlord warned me. And I know I wasn't the first to go up there after dark. but I might be the only one who came back down alive. A chilling, slow-burning tale of a house hiding something that should never have been disturbed. After my divorce, I needed space. Not just emotional, but physical distance from memories, familiar streets, and people who only knew me through pain. I found a listing for a quiet rental in a sleepy town 3 hours away. It was nothing fancy, just a single-story home with outdated wallpaper and a yard full of dry leaves. But the rent was cheap, and the owner, an older man named Mr. Halverson, didn't ask many questions. Perfect. I moved in during the last week of September. From the start, the house had a strange atmosphere. Not haunted, exactly, just watchful. Like the air itself was waiting for something. There were cold drafts that came from no visible source, especially in the laundry room at the back of the house. At night, the hallway there always felt darker than the rest of the house, no matter how many lights I turned on. A weekend, I was organizing cleaning supplies in the laundry room when I noticed the wall behind the metal shelf looked slightly uneven, almost like it had been patched. The shelf wasn't fixed to the wall, so I slid it aside. And that's when I found it. A door. Old, rotting wood with an iron handle that was ice cold to the touch. Dust covered the edges. There were scratch marks on the lower part, as though someone or something had tried to claw their way out. I stared at it for a long time. It wasn't just the shock of discovery, it was something else, a sense of being watched, a deep pressure in my chest, like something on the other side was holding its breath. That night, I couldn't sleep. My dreams were filled with whispering, scratching, and a thudding heartbeat that wasn't mine. The next morning, curiosity took over. I opened the door. The basement was narrow and steep, and the air that rushed out was damp and musty, as though it hadn't been disturbed in decades. I grabbed a flashlight and descended the creaky wooden steps. The temperature dropped instantly. The air felt thicker. I heard my own footsteps echo back with a delay that didn't feel natural. The basement wasn't just old. It was wrong. The walls weren't fully concrete. Some were earth, like it had been dug out by hand. Strange objects were scattered around. A rusted metal crib, antique dolls with missing eyes, dozens of empty picture frames hanging on nails that went into nothing but dirt. There was even an old phonograph sitting in the corner, motionless, until it crackled to life and began playing a distorted lullaby all by itself. Suddenly, I heard something behind me, a slow, dragging noise. I turned and saw nothing. My flashlight flickered, and in that brief moment of darkness, I felt breathing behind my neck. I fled. I slammed the door and shoved the shelf back in place. My hands were shaking. I wanted to believe I imagined it all, but that night, I heard it. Knocking, soft at first, like polite taps, then harder, scratching, and then my name. It whispered it from under the floorboards, always between 2 and 3 a.m. I tried to block it out with headphones, music, sleep medication. Nothing worked. I called Mr. Halverson the next morning. I told him about the basement. He was silent for a long time. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. "You weren't supposed to find it. We sealed it for a reason. 20 years ago, someone went down there and never came back. It doesn't want to be alone." I begged for more information. He refused, said he'd refund my rent if I promised to leave. But I didn't. I needed answers. That night, I reopened the door. The basement was colder now. Wet footprints led across the floor to the far corner, where the dirt wall had been partially dug out. Behind it, I saw a second door. This one made of blackened wood covered in symbols I didn't recognize, and then I heard the whisper again. Closer. I turned and saw her. A pale, eyeless woman in a torn dress, her mouth stretched too wide. She didn't walk. She glided toward me. I ran, tripping on a broken toy. As I reached the stairs, I looked back once. She was smiling. That night, I dreamt of her face, her cold fingers brushing my skin, her voice inside my head. The next morning, the door in the laundry room was open again. No matter how many times I closed it, locked it, nailed it shut, it opened. I left a week later. But even now, in my new apartment, sometimes at 2:43 a.m. I hear the faintest sound, like knocking, like the basement is following me.